Hi. Really nice to see you.
So Randi, of course, is a founder and CEO of Zuckerberg Media, a speaker, author, entrepreneur, investor. It just keeps going on and on. So really excited to speak with you today about being a woman in tech.
Thanks. And most importantly, a mom, which is what I was doing up until I arrived here this morning. So
I left that off the list. I shouldn't have. So before we get started on what you're doing right now, I kind of want to talk about your journey and how you ended up in tech. And I believe it wasn't initially what you wanted to do growing up. You wanted to be in the arts, correct?
Yes. It's funny, my whole childhood, if you had asked me what I wanted to do, I would have said that I wanted to be an opera singer or sing on Broadway. Almost everything that I had to do had to do with performance. And I grew up in New York City, so it was all at my fingertips. But then somewhere along the way, like most creative people, life happens. Someone tells you, hey, you should maybe go into something that makes money, or you should do something, or think about other skills. And oh, that's a great hobby. So when I got to college, I actually majored in marketing and psychology. My first job out of college was actually at Forbes.
There you go.
I spent my time working at Forbes, and it was a great launch pad. But I had also done some work in digital marketing. I did some work at Ogilvy and Mather ad agency. And so when my brother started this thing called the Facebook, he's like, hey, who could I get who knows about digital marketing and who I could get to work for free? And then that started my whole career in tech.
So were you like, when you made that decision to go work for Mark, did you have a moment where you felt like, oh, I'm in tech now. I'm transitioning to be a woman in tech?
No, I don't think I really, in fact, I actually thought about going out to Silicon Valley as a 6-month experiment and adventure, maybe a year tops. I mean, I was a lifelong New Yorker. I'd never even been to California. I had barely left New York. I was like, wow, people live outside of New York on purpose. I was like that New Yorker. And I loved everything the city had to offer. And so I was ready for an adventure, but I thought, okay, this will be a 6-month, 1-year thing tops. But I fell in love with Silicon Valley somewhere along that way. I fell in love with the entrepreneurial spirit. And I remember thinking about my career in New York and thinking, you know what, I know exactly where I'll be 10 years from now, because I know I will, if I work for 2 years, I'll get promoted to an account executive, and then I'll get promoted to this, and if I do this. And in Silicon Valley, anything seemed possible. Right. There were these young people who were just dreaming up ideas and then doing them, and they owned their own success and failure. It was so exciting. I'd never seen that. So somewhere along the line, I never set out to be a woman in tech, but I sort of fell into it.
Right, and the non-traditional career paths is something that's celebrated in Silicon Valley.
Absolutely. I also think there's something about the East Coast, schools on the East Coast here, where we don't really teach people to fail. We don't really celebrate failure. In fact, we tell people avoid failure at all costs. And so you see people going into very traditional risk-averse careers. Whereas I feel like if you go out to school at Stanford or you're in Silicon Valley, you're told that failure is a wonderful thing and you should embrace it and risk everything and start everything. And so that spirit, that was something I had never encountered before, and it brought out a creativity in me that I hadn't really tapped into or explored.
So has there been something throughout your career that you've experienced, such a failure that brought you in a better direction?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's so many times that I've experienced that. I mean, even when we were working at Facebook, there were so many times that we tried things, they didn't work. We then pivoted and did incredible things that worked from there. But I remember right after I left Facebook, I started my own production company. And my very first project out of that, I executive produced a series for Bravo about Silicon Valley. And the show, it had so much buzz. It was so exciting. The 6 entrepreneurs that we were following they were incredible people. The show just didn't do well for whatever reason. Television's really hard. Our first episode did great, second not so well, and then they were like, we're gonna run the rest of the episodes as a marathon at 3:00 in the morning. We're like, yay! Oh wait, not yay. And I thought, wow, that was my first project on my own. How am I gonna pick myself up off the floor from that? How am I gonna recover? I left an incredible job and to start my own company, and this is the first thing that happens. But 2 or 3 years later, when I wrote my children's book Dot, it was one of the same executives that had greenlit that show that called me up and said, you know what, we loved working with you. That was just one show that didn't work, but can we take a second chance on Dot? And now here we are, 52 episodes later on Dot, and Dot's airing in 30 countries around the world. And what felt like crippling failure at the time at the Bravo show was actually a stepping stone where I never would have had my show Dot on air without it.
And I want to get back to Dot and your children's book and your children and all of that. But first, I kind of want to pivot and go back to your early time in Silicon Valley. Yeah. And you know, it's well known that there is a gender imbalance over there. And can you tell us a little bit about your experiences with that?
Sure. Well, it's kind of funny / sad. Now when people ask me what my best advice is for being a woman in tech, I feel like I have to say have a male name like I have, because I feel like in the early days of being in Silicon Valley, half the meetings that I got were because people thought that when they got an email from Randi that they were meeting with a guy. And I mean, it's funny and it's sad and it's so true of the culture out there. I mean, I could tell you, for years I could count on one hand the amount of times or the number of women that I encountered along my path. And so I loved being in Silicon Valley, but I had a complicated relationship with it because on one hand, here I was at, arguably the greatest company on the planet and working on the coolest things, so innovative with the brightest minds. But then I also would look around the room and I would say, well, where are the women? Where are people of color? Like, is it only one demographic that gets to decide what's innovative for the entire world? And I always had a very complicated push and pull relationship with that. So after about a decade in Silicon Valley, I decided that I wanted to find a way for the next chapter of my career to allow me to be part of the solution instead of just sitting and passively watching what was happening.
So since your time over there in Silicon Valley, you're back, the New Yorker's back in New York, right?
Yes, the New Yorker is back in New York.
Do you feel like there's been progress at all?
I do. I especially feel like there's progress when I look at tech hubs outside of Silicon Valley. Here in New York, for example, I think is one of the biggest concentrations of female founders that you see in tech, running great companies around e-commerce, fashion. I mean, there's an incredible community of female tech founders here. When you go to Austin, Texas, when you go to some of the other tech hubs around the country, you really see they don't have some of the same baggage that Silicon Valley has. So they can create a tech hub with a new culture that feels right for that city. And part of me, that's why I love being in a city like New York, because you have technology, but it's not a one industry town. I think part of what feeds into the problem in Silicon Valley is you have all of this founder worship. It's a one industry town. Everyone is having the same conversation about everything. It really feeds into this echo chamber. Whereas in New York, everyone rides the same subway. Right. It's different. You have a bigger worldview.
And so speaking of progress, a lot of what you've been working on is teaching young women and getting them early on as children interested in tech and aware that STEM is cool. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So somewhere along the line, I came up with a hypothesis. I decided that it was going to be really hard to fix the gender problem from inside Silicon Valley because the systems there are so entrenched. It's so hard to change anything. So I started getting really excited about a lot of the work that I had done at Facebook was around video and media and pop culture. And you can really see how much media and pop culture and the arts influence people and change things. I started working on several projects more targeted towards adult women. As I was researching, though, all of my research showed that it's right around 3rd and 4th grade that girls turn away from technology. Like any entrepreneur does, I pivoted and I thought, okay, I have to focus my work on preschool and elementary school girls. So that's why in the last few years, a lot of my projects have been around really techie shows, books, experiences, events that are targeted towards girls and their families, hoping, if I can get that 8-year-old girl excited about technology, maybe she's going to stay with it and be the next billion-dollar founder in Silicon Valley.
So your newest venture kind of is at the intersection of family and tech. Can you tell me a little bit more about Sue's Tech Kitchen?
Oh, Sue's Tech Kitchen. I'm so excited about it. This is my newest entrepreneurial adventure. I just recently got back from Chattanooga, Tennessee, where over 1,000 people came through the first weekend of Sue's Tech Kitchen. It's our new family-friendly dining experience that's very tech savvy. So instead of, I feel like right now when you want to go out to dinner as a family, you either have to optimize for the adults and drag the kids along to a boring multi-course dinner, or you optimize for the kids and mom and dad get dragged along to like Benihana or Chuck E. Cheese or something where there's a lot going on. And so I thought, okay, could you use technology to make something that sits in the middle, that's fun for everyone? At Sue's Tech Kitchen, families came through, they were able to go through 6 different super techy dining experiences. They had 3D printers that made s'mores for everyone. You got to like race robots. You had this reimagined dinner table that played 360 movies on it. Just really exciting things to give kids that fun love of tech and to show families that tech could bring them together.
So why Chattanooga?
I love Chattanooga. I went there in February. I was invited to give a speech for the Chattanooga Women's Leadership. And I have to say, before going there, I didn't really, when I think of the top 10 tech hubs in my mind, Chattanooga is probably not one of them. But I went there and I met all of these tech startups. I met these amazing 3D printing startups, these women angel investing groups that are investing. I mean, this is a city that's really trying to have a turnaround, that lost a lot of automotive factory jobs and is trying to redefine itself as a tech hub. And it just made me think, okay, there are probably dozens of mid-sized cities like that around America where their technology is really going to save these cities and turn them around. And if we can start introducing kids and families to tech now in a fun way, that's what's going to revitalize cities across America.
And that kid could grow up and be
Exactly. So I fell in love with Chattanooga in February, and when we were thinking about Sue's Tech Kitchen, I thought, okay, I know exactly where I want to launch it.
So it sounds really exciting. A lot is going to change in the next few years
Yes.
for you, and you've got new projects coming out. When you said earlier that 10 years ago you thought that you knew your 10-year career path, what do you think now, 10 years out?
Wow,
I mean, what you'll be doing?
Now I feel like I can't even predict it because the things that I'm doing now didn't even exist 10 years ago.
Right.
And that's why, I mean, I feel really thankful to my parents who are both doctors. I mean, they had the most stable careers that you could think of, medical school and then residency and this. And they never pushed us into it. I mean, they certainly wouldn't have pushed us to go work in social media because that didn't even exist when we were young. And I think that's the beauty of the world we're in now, that in 10 years from now, things are going to look so different. Maybe there's going to be new platforms around augmented and virtual reality. Maybe there'll be new platforms around artificial intelligence or machine learning, things that are just on the cutting edge now that might become part of our everyday lives. And who knows what our careers are going to look like adapting to that.
And who knows, your children could one day work in industries that don't exist.
Oh
yet,
my
right?
gosh, I mean, or invent industries that don't exist. I think that's what's so exciting too, is that it used to be really difficult to start your own company 20, 30 years ago. Now today, you have a laptop, a Shopify, a blog, you can start a company in 2 or 3 hours. The opportunity is it's endless for anyone. So for me, that's why a lot of the work that I'm doing now is around motivating kids, parents, especially girls and women, around tech and business and entrepreneurship, because we are in such an exciting world, and I just wouldn't want to see the gender gap grow any wider.
Absolutely. Well, the work you're doing is fantastic in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. It was great to join you today.
Yeah.